Good evening and welcome to the fourth installment of the Literary Music series. My name's Alex Goldberg and I'm a violinist coming to you today from the San Francisco Bay Area. Tonight's theme will be motion, and I'll be reading selections from Plato's Symposium, Euripides is Bacchae, and I will be playing the Allemande and Sarabande from Bach's Partita No. 2 in D minor for solo violin, along with Eugène Ysaÿe's Sonata No. 4 in E minor for solo violin. Thank you. So I'd like to begin quickly by talking a bit about these texts and why I chose them, and also about how I see the music as relating to them. So first, it should definitely be said that these Ysaÿe sonatas, which also make a set of 6, owe a great deal to Bach's original set of 6 sonatas and partitas for solo violin. Ysaÿe was directly inspired by them, and he also uses many of similar compositional techniques like polyphony, having multiple voices carrying on at the same time in just the one violin. And he also uses many of the same Baroque and Renaissance dance forms as Bach did. And today I'll be playing the 4th sonata in E minor, which in fact begins with both an Allemande and then a Sarabande in the second movement, mirroring the 2 movements of Bach that I've chosen. The Ysaÿe also ends with a last fast movement, a very exciting, frenzied piece. Just a brief note on the dances. The Allemande and the Sarabande are court dances, again, from the Renaissance and Baroque periods, and they're very slow and stately. To us today, they might even seem almost stuffy or old-fashioned, but it has to be said that when they were first popping onto the scene, they were considered almost scandalous because they were too sensuous and sexual for the nature of the courts. And of course, dancing relates very intimately to the theme that I've chosen of motion. We humans are really dancing creatures. It's been a part of our culture since prehistory, really, and dance has evolved with us the whole time. Now, a little bit on this theme of motion and how it plays out in these 2 texts. I think that to kind of ground this discussion, the following dichotomy is useful. It comes from Faust's monologue in Goethe's Faust Part 1. Faust says that he has these 2 souls within him, and their duality is tearing him apart. The one soul that wants to soar in the heavens, gazing down on the earth from afar, almost outside of time and nature, viewing this eternal sunset forever. The other soul clings to the world in furious lust. This is a material soul. It's a soul of action, of constant motion, of always doing something. And this to me seems to really bring to light what I see as a central paradox in who we are as humans. We're creatures intrinsically of motion. We breathe. Blood pumps through our veins. In order to live, we have to move. Stillness for us only comes in death. At the same time, when we talk about our experiences of the transcendent, we often think about them and talk about them in terms of stillness. I think this kind of dichotomy is very well put by Wordsworth in his poem, The Excursion. I'm going to just read a very brief excerpt from that. Mysterious union with its native sea, even in such a shell, the universe itself is to the ear of faith. And there are times, I doubt not, when to you it doth impart authentic tidings of invisible things, of ebb and flow and ever-during power, and central peace subsisting at the heart of endless agitation. This really brings to light to me that when we look for these experiences of the transcendent, to almost bypass our mortal nature and get into this sort of eternal, perhaps spiritual realm, or an out-of-body experience out of this everyday flow of time, we're at the same time completely of and ensconced in this ever-moving material world, this ebb and flow and endless agitations, Wordsworth says. And yet, in those moments of transcendence, what we're seeking and what we're grasping is stillness, that peace itself. So how do we kind of square the circle here and unify the embodied and emotional nature of our human existence with our seeking of this transcendent stillness? I'd like to first look at Plato. I'm going to read now from the Symposium, which is a dialogue where Socrates and his interlocutors give a series of speeches on love. The part that I'll be reading today comes from Socrates' speech, though it's in fact notable because he's not speaking in his own voice. He's actually giving an extended quotation of a conversation he had with a priestess, Diotima. So thus far, he and Diotima in their dialogue have arrived at the conclusion that love can be described generally as the love of the everlasting possession of the good. They go on thus. Then if this be the nature of love, can you tell me further, Diotima said, what is the manner of the pursuit? What are they doing who show all this eagerness and heat, which is called love? And what is the object which they have in view? Answer me. Nay, Diotima, Socrates replied, if I had known, I should not have wondered at your wisdom, nor would I have come to learn from you about this very matter. Well, she said, I'll teach you. The object which they have in view is birth and beauty, whether of body or soul. I don't understand you, I said. I'll make my meaning clearer, Diotima replied. I mean to say that all men are bringing to the birth in their bodies and in their souls. There's a certain age at which human nature desires procreation which must be in beauty and not in deformity. And this procreation is a divine thing, for conception and generation are an immortal principle in the mortal creature, and in the inharmonious they can never be. But the deformed is always inharmonious with the divine, and the beautiful harmonious with it. So beauty, then, is the destiny or goddess of parturition, who presides at birth, and therefore, when approaching beauty, the conceiving power is propitious, and diffusive and benign, and begets and bears fruit. At the sight of ugliness, she frowns, contracts, and has a sense of pain, and turns away and shrivels up, and not without a pang refrains from conception. This is the reason why, when the hour of conception arrives, and the teeming nature is full, there's such a flutter and ecstasy about beauty, whose approach is the alleviation of the pain of travail. For love, Socrates, is not, as you imagine, the love of the beautiful only. What then? The love of generation and of birth in beauty. Yes, I said, but why of generation? Because to the mortal creature, generation is a sort of eternity and immortality, she replied. And if, as has been already admitted, love is of the everlasting possession of the good, all men will necessarily desire immortality together with good. Wherefore love is of immortality. Marvel not, she said, if you believe that love is of the immortal, as we've several times acknowledged. For here again, on the same principle too, the mortal nature is seeking as far as is possible to be everlasting and immortal. And this is only to be attained by generation, because generation always leaves behind a new existence in the place of the old. Nay, even in the life of the same individual, there is succession and not absolute unity. A man is called the same, and yet in the short interval which elapses between youth and age, and in which everyone is said to have life and identity, man is undergoing a perpetual process of loss and reparation. Hair, flesh, bones, blood, the whole body is always changing. And that's true not only of the body, but also of the soul, whose habits, tempers, opinions, desires, pleasures, pains, and fears never remain the same in any one of us, but are always coming and going. He who's been thus far instructed in the things of love, and who has learned to see the beautiful in due order and succession, when he comes toward the end, will suddenly perceive a nature of what beauty. And this, Socrates, is the final cause of all our former toils. A nature which in the first place is everlasting, not growing and decaying or waxing and waning. And secondly, isn't fair in one point of view and foul in another, such that as if it were foul to some and fair to others, or foul at one time and fair at another time. It doesn't exist in any other being, as for example in an animal, or in heaven, or in earth, or in any other place. But beauty, absolute, separate, simple, and everlasting, which without diminution and without increase, or any change, is imparted to the ever-growing and perishing beauties of all other things. He who from these ascending under the influence of true love begins to perceive that beauty is not far from the end. And the true order of going, or being led by another, to the things of love is to begin from the beauties of the earth and mount upwards for the sake of that other beauty, using these as steps only, and from one going on to two, and from two to all fair forms, and from fair forms to fair practices, and from fair practices to fair ideas, and until at last from fair ideas he remains at the idea, the notion of absolute beauty, and at last will know what the essence of beauty is. This, my dear Socrates, said Diotima, is that life above all others, which man should live, in the contemplation of beauty absolute, a beauty which, if you once beheld, you would not see to be after the measure of gold or garments or fair youths, whose presence now entrances you. And you and many a one would be content to live seeing these youths only, and conversing with them without meat or drink, if that were possible. You want only to look at them and be with them. But what if man had eyes to see the true beauty? The divine beauty, I mean, pure and dear and unalloyed, not clogged with the pollution of mortality and all the colors and vanities of human life thither-looking, and holding converse with the true beauty, simple and divine. Remember how in only that communion, beholding beauty with the eye of the mind, will one be enabled to bring forth not images of beauty, but realities, and bringing forth the nourishing true virtue to become the friend of God and be immortal, if mortal man may. So why choose this excerpt of Plato? To me, it really resonates with what I feel when I hear and play Bach, but especially these solo Bach sonatas. In the Symposium, in the speech, we see love described as this kind of ladder, to borrow a simile from Alan Bloom, with the rungs moving from the physical to the immaterial and to the transcendent, this form of beauty. From the finitude of mortal life and mortal goods, we move to infinity. And through this intensely living human process of generation, of giving birth, bearing fruit, truly something that is only of the living, of the moving, only through this can we reach immortal beauty. Yet Eros, the love, never leaves us, and it's never subsumed under anything else. Rather, Eros guides us up this path. Love takes us to the peak of this ladder. Now, Bach wrote this set of 6 sonatas as a musical eulogy for his first wife, dearly beloved, who just died. To me, these sonatas really symbolize that fundamental struggle of ours, with the tragedy of existence, this seeking of immortality, when we have to grapple with that tragedy that those we love are always mortal. Bach's attempt through this transcendence of our experience of music, to me, is through this experience of the infinite that one gets when one hears music, to grasp at this eternity and this eternal life. And notably, he does this through the forms of these court dances. The dance is essentially an embodied, emotional form. It needs to be danced to exist. It depends on human action. But Bach combines this with the immaterial and analytic or abstract rules of music, forming this unity between this sort of giving birth, this organic process, with this, this ideal form, this analytic and abstract concept. From dissonance to resolution, we go harmonically, and from tension to ease and to peace. These dances are also fundamentally dances of love. They're erotic dances. And in that way, it's love that's moving us on this ladder from this earthly motion that we make in dancing or in playing this music to the immaterial stillness of our experience and of transcendence, this ideal creation. Now this leads me to Ysaÿe and Euripides, which sees the use of motion and of generation in that sense, again, for this sort of loss of mortality or this communion with the divine, but in a very, very different way. So for some context of this play, the Bacchae, Dionysus, born to Semele, a Theban woman, and Zeus, the king of the gods, has now been scorned by Thebes. His worship is outlawed. He comes back with a vengeance. And Dionysus, this god of ritual madness, of frenzy, of theater, of drunkenness, the women of Thebes are following him into the mountains in this kind of ecstatic ritual worship, where in the wild mountains outside the city they dance and hunt. They're free from the political and social existence that they have within the walls of the city, and from these roles that they have. And in the wild, they can truly taste of transcendence now that they're freed from their social selves. I'm going to read a choral ode that first describes the birth of Dionysus, whose mother Semele was struck down, following which Zeus sewed him into a kind of womb on his thigh to hide him from vengeful Hera. And the ode continues on to describe the kind of ritual procession of these maenads on the hills following Dionysus. From Asia o'er the holy ridge of Tmolus, hasten to a pleasant task, a toil that brings no weariness, for Dionysus' sake, in order of the Bacchic god. Who loiters in the rood? Who lingers neath the roof? Avaunt, I say, and let every lip be hushed in solemn silence. For I will raise a hymn to Dionysus, as custom yet ordains. O happy he who to his joys initiated in heavenly mysteries and leads a holy life, joining heart and soul in Bacchic revelry upon the hills, purified from every sin. Observing the rites of Cybele, the mighty mother, and brandishing the thyrsus with ivy-wreathed head, he worships Dionysus. Go forth, ye Bacchanals, bring home the Bromian god Dionysus, child of a god, from the mountains of Phrygia to the spacious streets of Hellas. Bring home the Bromian god, whom on a day his mother in her sore travail brought forth untimely, yielding up her life beneath the lightning stroke of Zeus's winged bolt. But forthwith Zeus, the son of Cronos, found for him another womb wherein to rest, for he hid him in his thigh and fastened it with golden pins to conceal him from Hera. And when the fates had fully formed the horned god, he brought him forth and crowned him with a coronal of snakes, whence it is the Thyrsus-bearing maenads hunt the snake to twine about their hair. O Thebes, nurse of Semele, crown thyself with ivy, burst forth with blossoms fair of green convolvulus, and with the boughs of oak and pine join in the Bacchic revelry. Don thy coat of dappled fawnskin, decking it with tufts of silvered hair, with reverent hand the sportive wand now wield. Anon shall the whole land be dancing, when Bromius leads his revelers to the hills. To the hills, away, where wait him groups of maidens from loom and shuttle, roused in frantic haste by Dionysus. O hidden cave of the Curetes, O hallowed haunts in Crete that saw Zeus born, where Corybantes, with crested helms, devised for me in their grotto the rounded timbrel of oxhide, mingling Bacchic minstrelsy with the shrill, sweet accents of the Phrygian flute, a gift bestowed them on Mother Rhea, to add its crash of music to the Bacchante's source of joy. But frantic satyrs won it from the mother goddess for their own, and added it to their dances and festivals, which gladden the heart of Dionysus each third recurrent year. Oh, happy that votary, when from the hurrying revel rout he sinks to earth, in his holy robe of fawnskin, chasing the goat to drink its blood, a banquet sweet of flesh uncooked, as he hastes to Phrygia's or to Libya's hills, while in the van the Bromian god exults with cries of Evoe. With milk and wine and streams of luscious honey flows the earth, and Syrian incense smokes. While the Bacchante, holding in his hand a blazing torch of pine uplifted on her wand, waves it as she speeds along, rousing wandering votaries, and as she waves it cries aloud with wanton tresses tossing in the breeze. And thus to crown the revelry, he raises loud his voice. On, ye bacchanals, pride of Tmolus, with its trills of gold, aye, to the sound of the booming drum, chanting in joyous strains the praises of your joyous god, with Phrygian accents lifted high. What time the holy lute, with sweet complaining note, invites you to your hallowed sport, according well with feet that hurry wildly to the hills, like a colt that gambols at its mother's side in the pasture, with gladsome heart each maenad bounds along. Here too we see this kind of communion with a divine beauty, a divine love, but this is very different from the beauty that we see in the Platonic forms, this eternal, unchanging, and still beauty accessible through reason that we see in Plato. This beauty of the Maenads is that of Dionysus, that god of ritual and of madness. It's pure, unmediatable experience. It's indivisible. It can only be felt, not rationally understood. The Maenads are free from the human artificiality and artifice of the polis. They eat their meat raw. They weave snakes through their hair, at one with nature, free from human fears or constraints. But they're not just crazed hedonistic cultists, loosed of convention and worked up into a chaotic frenzy. There's an order that underpins their revelry. There's the booming of the drum. There's the chants of their joy. There's these Phrygian modes played in the flutes and the other instruments. But in this procession, they cast off these shackles of their roles in the polis and instead go through this unfiltered or leadness of Bacchic revelry. To me, this is Ysaÿe. Within these ritualistic and antique forms of the Baroque dances that he takes upon himself, instead of aiming at the heavens like Bach, he goes to the earth, clinging to it as Faust does with this furious lust. He gets at these earthy harmonies, these physical, instinctual feelings of hearing and playing these pieces. This isn't this hierarchic ladder of transcendence that we see in Plato. Rather, it's a transcendence and an experience of the divine through the earth, through this milk and honey and the animals of the earth, through this unmediated experience of nature without the filter that we have of society or the political realm. I hope that these texts will allow us tonight to approach these pieces together in a different way than we might, for instance, unmediated by this introduction and alone in the traditional setting of a concert hall. There's really nothing else like experiencing live music when you're in the room, in terms of that physical and auditory experience of the concert hall, of bodies being in a space with other bodies, seeing and hearing them and living with them. But this new medium that we're using, this internet, allows a much broader reach, and it allows a much more democratic experience of who gets to hear what and when. I hope you'll join me now as I play the Bach and the Ysaÿe in giving ourselves up as much as we can to the beauty of this music and the motion of these dances, even as we're forced to stay still within our homes during this period of shelter in place. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy the music.
Thank you all so much for tuning in to this fourth installment of the Literary Music series. I hope that this was able to bring some pleasure or peace into your night, and please have a good weekend and stay safe. Thank you very much.